We are live and you may begin. Thank you.
I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, February 18th, 2021. Let's start off by starting roll call, please.
Yep. Chair Dennison.
Here.
Vice Chair Pevsner. Commissioners Dallas.
Here.
And Spears.
Present.
Next, we have approval of the agenda.
I'll move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Next up is approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, or modifications to the minutes as presented?
Oh, I have an addition. On my reference to a podcast, since this is a referenceable document, I thought it'd be nice to actually have the podcast name in it. It's 99% Invisible, and it's the episode 429. The title is Stuccoed, like stucco on the building, Stuccoed in Time. So,
Any other modifications to the minutes as presented?
Real quick, you said that was episode 429?
that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other modifications to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, I would solicit a motion to approve with the edits.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
I have to abstain.
Oh, and one abstention from Commissioner Pevsner, duly noted. Does not carry unanimously. Thank you. Next up is our council liaison report. We will come, oh yes, Councilmember Parkhurst is here. Do you have anything to report?
Just that we will have the housing element as a public hearing item on Tuesday's city council meeting. And as I understand it, we're going to be asked, and I think the report's right here, is we're going to be asked to choose between the two decisions, the one that you guys reviewed and then the one that you asked at your last meeting. So, or asked to be developed at the last meeting. So that's the main item. Also, just for you guys to know, there's the budget will be at the meeting. And then this water purchase, which I think will be very advantageous, but I don't think those directly impact you, but because you're looking into planning commission and infrastructure, I wanted to relay both of those as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the update.
No problem.
Next on the agenda, if the slide is ready, we will have community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. Do we have the community input slide?
Vincent, typically that's done in your department. Is Claire or Josh handed off that to anyone?
I have it. Let me put that up here.
Let me know if you need share permission, but you should be good.
Perfect, thank you. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The commission welcomes your attendance and participation virtually. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience online. State legislation, Government Code Section 54954.2 limits the commission's ability to take action on specific requests. Government Code, Section 54954.2 limits the placement of items on the agenda for action 72 hours prior to meetings, except for specific findings. No action or discussion may be undertaken by the Planning Commission on any item if not posted on the agenda, except that commissioners or staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public, or a commissioner or staff liaison may ask a question for clarification or make a brief report on his or her own activities. A commissioner of the commission itself may provide a reference to staff to report back to the commission at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or may direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. If there are any callers at this time, go ahead and put them through. Otherwise, we'll give them another minute or two to call in.
Chair Dennison, at this time, we don't have any callers, but like you said, we'll give them a minute to dial in.
Great, thank you. Again, just giving the community time to dial in, to provide public comment on items that are not on the agenda for tonight's meeting. Last 30 seconds or so of time allotted to allow the public to dial in for items that are not on tonight's agenda. All right.
Chair Dennison, at this time, we do not have anyone wishing to make public comment.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's the same line or not, but that slide has different information on it than our agenda does as to how to participate in public comment.
I might be using the old one. That's what I had on my desktop.
I
Okay.
believe the number will be correct. The meeting information might be a little bit different. So if people are calling in, the number appears to be correct, but the meeting information, the best way to get it would be off of the agenda that's posted on our city website.
Do we need to share the agenda, that first page, so that we can give people time to dial in? I have it right here if I'm allowed to
Yeah,
share.
I'd have to go, I don't have it that easily.
Chair Dennison, let me give you, there you go.
All right. So we'll give people just another minute or two in case they dialed in on the wrong number. This information is the up-to-date information that you can participate in this meeting at. The phone number, webinar ID, and passcode as delineated here is the correct one. So we'll give the public just another minute or two to dial in. And at this time, we're just letting the public have some time to dial in at the correct number for tonight's meeting for items that are not on the agenda. Again, items that are not on the agenda. All right. If anybody does call in the next minute or two, if you would please let us know.
Yes, sir. So far, we don't have anybody join yet, but if you wish to give more time, we can.
I think we would probably start with the update, and if people want to participate at a later date or at a later time, then we'll be sure and afford them that luxury. We
Sounds
have
good.
latitude to do that, right, City Attorney?
Yes, we can. We can reopen public comment later.
Okay, yeah. So why don't we go ahead and move on? First up is a discussion of the state housing law update.
All
We
right.
do have a presentation by our city attorney, Alex Giragosian. Do you want me to share that PowerPoint?
I think it'd be easier if maybe I shared it so I can click through the slides.
Okay.
Oscar, do we have screen sharing capability enabled?
You should, starting now.
Can everyone see my slide?
Yes,
Perfect. All right,
you can go to full screen. There you go.
great. Well, thank you, Chair Dennison. Today's presentation is for informational purposes only. As the body responsible for land use matters, I thought it might be appropriate for the Planning Commission to just be aware of the recent housing legislation that took effect in 2021 and the housing legislation that's been introduced for 2022. So just a recap of what's actually taken effect. So the legislation that was adopted last year and took effect January 1st this year. First, there are a number of streamlining housing approval bills that were introduced and approved. The first has to do with AB 1851, prohibits the denial of housing development projects at religious institutions based on a reduction in parking, so long as parking is not reduced more than 50%. So just to explain what that means, at a number of religious institutions, so imagine a church has a large parking lot and they want to build affordable housing in that parking lot. But if they did that, they would reduce the number of parking spaces that they're allotted. And oftentimes churches are allotted a certain number of parking spaces by pew. This bill would prevent the city from prohibiting that development based on reduction of parking if the parking isn't reduced by more than 50%. AB 3182 prohibits an HOA from restricting rentals of units, except short-term rentals, which they can continue to prohibit. And applications for ADUs are now deemed approved if the HOA fails to act within 60 days. That 60-day requirement also applies to cities as well. So why does this matter, and why did the legislator adopt this? So there are certain cities, you might think of maybe Hidden Hills, if you're familiar with it, which is next to Calabasas. Hidden Hills, for example, the entire city is an HOA. There's a wall around the entire city, with the exception of City Hall, because City Hall has to be Brown Act compliant, so you can't exclude people. But the remainder of the city is surrounded by a giant gate. And so all of it is an HOA, and formerly they weren't subject to all the state housing laws because they're considered like a private entity. Now the ADU laws also apply to them, and they're not exempted because they're HOA status. AB 831 allows for modifications of existing SB 35 applications. AB 168 also applies to SB 35. I won't go into what SB 35 is, just know that that's a very specific bill that targets affordable housing applications that the city of Sierra Madre doesn't really come across. An SB 35 application has to meet a number of complex findings, and it can't be located in a very high fire hazard severity zone, which is half of the city of Sierra Madre. So we won't really see any of those. SP 1030 just adopted minor technical amendments, so there's no need to discuss that one any further. Next, as you know, there are a number of the a number of COVID-related bills were adopted, and some of them dealt with housing. So AB 3088, that was the eviction moratorium. It protected residents who weren't able to pay rent from September 1st, 2020 through January 31, 2021. That was extended by SB 91 through the end of June. So the same rules that applied for AB 3088 have been extended through the end of June. AB 1561 extends housing entitlements by 18 months. So as you may know, once the Planning Commission grants a housing entitlement, an applicant has a certain number of months to pull building permits. I believe they have a year. And so that deadline has been extended by 18 months for all housing entitlements that are within, that were going to expire between, I think, March 2020 and January 31st, 2021. Next, we have the density bonus ordinance, the density bonus state law, and we'll talk about that later in the next presentation. There were a number of amendments made to the planning and zoning law. AB 725 deals with the housing element now has to designate sites for moderate income and above moderate income housing. So under AB 725, 25% of moderate income and above moderate income housing has to be located on sites where units 1 through 4 are allowed by right. That's what that one does. But that doesn't apply to the city. That doesn't apply to Sierra Madre because that one really takes effect in 2022. So it probably shouldn't be here, even though it was adopted in 2020. That law takes effect in 2022 and won't affect the housing element update that we have this year. SB 234 deals with the family daycare homes. It makes large family daycare homes a residential use by right. We'll probably be amending our zoning code, so that's something you're going to see in the near future. There was a CEQA amendment exempting qualifying transit-related projects. The city of Sierra Madre won't see that. That deals with large transit projects. And the last one had to do with homelessness. AB 2553 expands the Shelter Crisis Act to all cities and adds safe parking sites as eligible forms of shelter. So the Shelter Crisis Act, what that does is it allows cities to use public spaces to house homeless individuals, and it reduces the potential liability to the city. And so that's why a lot of cities advocated for it, and it was expanded to include all cities, because I think before it was limited to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland, I think.
I have a question.
Yes.
The SB 234, makes large family daycare homes. That's, in other words, it's not a large family. It's the aggregate of who is in the home.
Yeah. So a large family daycare home is one that takes care of between 7 to 14 children, and a small family daycare home takes care of children. I think it's 1 through 7, I suppose, children. So
will that bump up against some of our fire codes and things like that? Because 14 kids in a residential house may be a bit challenging.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to explore when we begin to look at the ordinance amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions on the new housing legislation before I move on to? Yes.
Yeah, on AB 2553, does that also mean that some of these parking sites will be considered shelter sites, shelter spaces for homeless people living out of their cars, and keep them from being evicted from that and moved around?
Only if the city designates it as such. So if the city wants to designate one of its parking lots as a shelter, then homeless individuals can go, and park there in their vehicles and stay there overnight. And I don't know that they get I don't know that they get the rights that tenants would get. I don't think that's the case, but it would count as a shelter towards, I think, our housing element. I haven't read the law, but I believe it counts as a shelter toward our housing element, and it would reduce the potential liability to the city.
So, because I know that cities that don't have shelters for homeless, even one bed, have restrictions on how they can move people about and evict them. But I know some of those park and ride areas, in different cities get occupied by homeless people, but the police run them out of there. So I'm just wondering if there's any advantage. Can we consider these shelter spots so then we can decide, how many homeless we want to have in our town?
That's a question I'll need to read the bill in greater detail to answer
Okay.
that question. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I just have several patients that live in park and rides along the 210 freeway, and it may not apply to us, but I'm just wondering, since I was told, and I don't know if this is true, but you can confirm it when you read it, that if you don't have any homeless shelter beds in your town, then you can't evict people from basically
yeah.
hunting themselves down in the park or something like that.
I know what that one's about.
Okay.
I believe what you're referencing is that's actually not state law. That's a case that came out of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, the Boise
Yes.
case, which states that you can't criminalize homelessness if you don't have adequate shelters.
Yes.
So that's what that case is about. But that's different than the case. That's different than what we have here.
Okay.
But I suppose you can connect the two by saying, if you can make a parking site a shelter,
Right.
and provide shelter to people, then you can prevent them from sleeping in the street.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And any other questions about these bills or about these laws? No longer bills. Okay. Moving on then. So if you remember last year, there was the Senate housing package that failed due to really a procedural error. And in the left-hand column, where it says 2020, we have all the bills from the past, so the ones that failed last year. And in the column next to it on the right, where it says 2021, these bills have essentially just been reintroduced as written by all the authors that had authored them the last time around, because they want to get them to this time around. So a quick description. I know we covered it last year, but just as a reminder for folks, SB 6, that will allow a housing development project. So if you remember, a housing development project is 2 or more units to be allowable on a neighborhood lot, which is defined as office or retail commercial zones that are not adjacent to an industrial use. SB 7 will allow the governor to certify affordable housing projects investing at least $15 million in an urban infill site for streamlined CEQA review. I mean, these are big projects. We probably won't see anything like this in Sierra Madre. SB 8, it's tentatively titled Density Bonus Law Amendments, but there's nothing in the bill. It's a placeholder just in case they want to further amend the density bonus law this year. But currently there's nothing there. SB 9 allows for ministerial approval for duplexes and lot splits in residential single-family zones and a relaxation of parking requirements. SB 10 provides upzoning to allow 10 residential units by right in urban infill areas, transit-rich areas, and job-rich areas to avoid CEQA and local constraints. SB 15, apologies, provides state grants to local jurisdictions for rezoning big box retailers or commercial shopping centers to allow for workforce housing. So as Amazon is pushing out a lot of these big box retailers, we're having a lot of vacant large buildings, and cities are considering, and developers are considering converting these into residential structures. And this bill would allow those applicants to use funds from the state to make that happen. And if you remember last year, there was another bill, SB 899, that would have allowed for affordable housing on land owned by religious institutions and nonprofit colleges. Interestingly, that bill was not introduced this year. And I looked into it, and it's because one of the reasons it got defeated last year was because the State Building and Construction Trade Council, which is basically the labor union for construction workers, fought it because Senator Wiener refused to include a requirement to use skilled and trained workforce in the bill. So because they weren't using organized labor in the bill, so they defeated it, and Senator Wiener decided not to introduce that bill this year. So that's the only one. That's the only bill from last year's Senate housing package that wasn't included in this year's Senate housing package. Now, interestingly, the League of California Cities had their first board meeting on February 11th, and they reviewed all these bills, and they honed in on SB 9, and this is the one that they've chosen to oppose, unless it's been amended. Unless it's amended. The league on its website has proposed a number of amendments to SB 9 and is calling on its member cities to send letters voicing their concerns and supporting the league's position against the bill, like I said, unless it's amended. They're not advocating to kill the bill, they're just advocating to amend it so it's more workable and favorable for cities. And so just so you could see what the legislative timeline looks like. So on August 31st, that Senate housing package from last year failed. On December 7th, which is the start of the new legislative session for 2021, all the bills we just talked about were reintroduced. On January 1st, all the bills from last year took effect. On June 4th, that's going to be the last day for all these bills that we just talked about to pass from their house of origin. So because this is the Senate housing package, by June 4th, all these Senate bills need to leave the Senate and they need to go to the Assembly. On August 16th, the legislature reconvenes from its summer recess, and that's where a lot of the negotiating happens. And they negotiate until about September 10th, which is the last day for each house to pass the bill. And then once it's passed on September 10th, the governor has about a month until October 10th to either veto the bill or to sign it. And with that, that's the end of this presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
A couple questions. Even though this is a housing package, they're all separate bills, right? So they can be voted up or down independently.
Correct.
And you said that SB 8 was a placeholder. Do we know what was in its predecessor, SB 1085?
Yeah, actually, SB 1085 is very, very similar to AB 2345, which passed and which we're going to consider at today's meeting.
Okay. So there's not, at least that we know of, there's not more amendments coming for the density bonus law that we're just going to have to amend again for.
I'm not aware of any. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. I guess we should take public hearing at this time on this topic.
And if you can share your agenda, I think would be better.
Vincent, you should have this slide in your email, or I think I can pull it up as well.
Okay.
At this time, anybody who would like to provide public comment about the public hearing that we just had, not public hearing, I'm sorry, about the presentation that we just had from City Attorney, now is the time to do so at the indicated I guess we're going to use this slide instead. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this specific item. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation virtually. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda are available for your convenience online. This public comment is specifically for the state housing law update. If there is any general public comment for something not on the agenda, we can reopen that part of the meeting as well. We'll give the public just a minute or two here to get dialed in. At this time, we have opened up public comment on this specific item, or if somebody was unable to participate in the general public comment for items not on the agenda earlier, we will reopen the general public comment for callers as well. You can dial in at the phone number that you see on your screen. If you do join Zoom, then you will want to raise your hand from your computer. Do we have any callers at this time?
Chair Dennison, at this time, we do not have anybody in public comment.
All right, if anybody does call in the next minute or two, go ahead, if you wouldn't mind letting us know. We'll take their comments.
Yes, sir.
Other than that, I think we can move on to the public hearing. Resolution number 21-01, recommending amendments to chapter 17.34, affordable housing of Title 17 zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code.
And our city attorney once again has a PowerPoint presentation that he's going to be sharing with you today.
Oh, muted. Thank you, Director Gonzalez. I will share my screen now. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna provide an overview of the density bonus law and the recent amendments. No, it's not visible. Oh, there we are. So first, a developer has to request the density bonus. They don't automatically get it. And once they request it, they have to request it for a housing development that consists of at least 5 or more residential units. The density bonus that they're requesting, the development has to be located within a mixed use or residential zone. And they have to agree to record a 55-year affordability covenant to construct a threshold number of affordable senior or qualifying housing units. Or in the alternative, if they don't want to construct those units, they can donate land for affordable housing and get a density bonus. So the density bonus law establishes minimum eligibility thresholds, and those thresholds are tied to either the type of unit or the affordability level. So looking at the first example, at least 5% of the units are have to be for very low income households. You can also get it if at least 10% of the units are for lower income households, or at least 10% of the units in a common interest development. So think HOAs are for moderate income households and are offered for sale. A market rate senior citizen housing development with at least 35 dwelling units, which in Sierra Madre we've decreased the threshold for that to, I believe, 5. Or at least 10% of the units are for very low income transitional foster youth, disabled veterans, or homeless persons. And lastly, you can get a density bonus if at least 20% of the units are for lower income student housing. And so what do those household income thresholds actually translate into for Los Angeles County? Because they differ from county to county. So for a family of 4, you're considered extremely low income if you make $33,800 for the year. Again, for a family of 4, you're considered very low income if you make $56,300 in Los Angeles County. Low if you make $90,000, and your moderate income if you make $92,000. So if you qualify for these thresholds, then you get a density bonus. And the density bonus you get depends on how many units within those affordability standards that you build. So if you build 5% affordable for your, if 5% of the units in your project in total are affordable to very low income households, then you get a 20% bonus. Similarly, if 10% of the units in your project are affordable to low income households, again, you get a 20% density bonus. The changes here are highlighted in red. So as you can see now, if you build 15% for very low income, you get a 50% density bonus. If you build 24% for low income, you get a 50% density bonus. And if you build 44% at moderate income, you get a 50% density bonus. The old density bonus maximum under state law used to be 35%. They've increased all the density bonus maximums to 50%. So incentives and concessions. Just going to quickly discuss what they are. It's an incentive or concession is something you're granted if you get a density bonus. It can include a reduction in site development standards or a modification of the zoning code or architectural design requirements that results in identifiable and actual cost reductions. It can be an approval of a mixed-use zoning in conjunction with the housing project if the inclusion of commercial, office, or industrial uses will reduce the cost of the housing project, and such non-residential uses are compatible with the housing project and existing and planned development in the area. Or it can also be other regulatory incentives or concessions proposed by the local agency or the developer that result in identifiable and actual cost reductions to provide for affordable housing costs or rents. So again, the incentives and concessions are tied to the affordability levels. And so if you build a unit, if your project includes 5% of the units at very low income, then you only get 1 concession or incentive. But if your project has 15% of its units available for very low income households, then you get 3 incentives or concessions. What's changed under this law is that the legislator has decided to incentivize low income units. So now, before it used to be, you needed to have 20% available to get 2 incentives and concessions. Now you only need 17% to get 2 incentives and concessions, or 24% to get 3 incentives or concessions. Waivers. So we talked about, you can get a density bonus. You can get an incentive or concession. You may also qualify for a waiver. Now the state law applicable to waivers hasn't changed, but I thought it's worth just going over so we know what a waiver is as well. So if compliance with the development standard would physically preclude construction of a housing development utilizing the density bonus and concession or incentive, the applicant may submit a proposal for a waiver or reduction of development standard. There is no maximum limit on the number of waivers an applicant may request. But waivers are much more difficult to get than an incentive or concession. And waivers and incentive waivers, waivers only apply to objective development standards. So if you remember, the incentives or concessions, that might allow you to build in a place where you normally would not be able to build. But a waiver only applies to development standards. And so these are just some examples of development standards that a waiver might apply to. So in order to deny an incentive, concession, or a waiver, generally speaking, you need to show that the incentive, concession, or waiver does not result in identifiable and actual cost reductions. Or it would have a specific adverse impact on public health or safety, the physical environment, or any property listed in the California Register of Historical Resources, and there is no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the impact without rendering the development unaffordable to low and moderate income households, or it would be contrary to state or federal law. So while the findings for denial for an incentive, concession, or waiver are pretty similar, you don't automatically get a waiver. You have to prove that your project actually needs it, that you couldn't proceed with the project. It wouldn't be economically feasible unless you were granted the waiver. So there's that additional finding necessary for a waiver. The parking ratios, so if you get if you qualify for a density bonus, you also qualify for a parking ratio that's different than whatever is under the municipal code. So the parking ratios were also changed under the new state law. If you're proposing 2 to 3 bedrooms, now instead of 2 parking spaces, you only need to provide 1.5. If you're proposing 4 or more bedrooms for affordable units, you only need 2 parking spaces per unit. These thresholds have also changed for rental projects with at least 11% very low income or 20% low income that are within half a mile of major transit stop. Again, Sierra Madre does not have a major transit stop, so these aren't really relevant to us, but we include it in the ordinance regardless because it exists under state law. And who knows, maybe in the future we might have a major transit stop. And so those.
Just to clarify one point, these are the maximum that the city can require under the state law, right? So if we wanted to require less parking, we could.
Yes, we can always require less parking. We can always grant a greater density bonus. We can always grant more concessions and incentives. And then the waivers, that's on a needs basis.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. And that's it for my presentation on the density bonus law. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Just wanted to clarify that the purpose of this is to align our codes with what is now legally allowed at the state level.
That's correct, Chair Johnson.
Yeah, if we were not to update the codes to be at a minimum these standards, then somebody could just come in and sue the city.
So our standards would be preempted under state law. If we chose to enforce our standards and they were contrary to state law, yes, they could sue the city. All right.
All right. So I guess at this time we should, are there any other questions of staff before we take community input? All right, then I guess community input at this time before we bring it back to the commission. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning this particular item. The resolution recommending amendments to Chapter 17.34 Affordable Housing of Title 17 Zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. The commission welcomes your attendance and participation virtually. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda and this presentation were available online. We'll give you some time to dial in at this time. Again, at this time, we are allowing for public comment on the topic of resolution number 21-01, recommending amendments to chapter 17.34, affordable housing of title 17, zoning of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission on this particular topic. The commission welcomes your attendance and participation virtually. When addressing the commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. And please keep comments to no more than 5 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Copies of the agenda and this presentation are available online for your convenience. Do we have any callers?
At this time, we do not have anybody wishing to make public comment.
All right. I can stall no longer. I will go ahead and bring this back to the commission, and if anybody does call in the next little bit, if you'd go ahead and put them through, please.
Yes, sir.
Any comments from the commissioners?
Yeah, I think staff has done a great job on modifying the code to match the new state law. A lot of this stuff deals with major transit stops and developments within half a mile, which we don't have any. So, you know, that doesn't really affect us. There is one part, though, that I think that we might want to consider doing more than what's required by the state. And that's in the parking, the alternate parking standards on table 1 in section 1734.070A, which is on page 29 of the staff packet. These are alternate parking standards that apply to a project that includes affordable housing units. But these aren't all that much different from our regular parking standards that we've newly adopted. And so if we really want to have this to be an incentive, we might want to consider lowering these. For instance, they say, you know, 0 to 1 bedroom, 1 parking space. That's as much as we require. We already have a thing that if you have an affordable unit, it's 1 fewer than as required. So if you had a development, say with 20% affordable, you would have a requirement under our regular code of 0.8 parking spaces. So this would actually be higher. And also we go by square footage, and up to 1,000 square feet is 1. So you could imagine a 2-bedroom fitting in within 1,000, especially if you're making affordable units, you'd make them a little smaller. So I think it would be better if we switch this to be 0.5 for 0 to 1, 1 for 2 to 3, and then leave 4 more at 2. And that way it would provide a little bit more of an incentive.
Commissioner Hutt, refresh my memory. What happens for less than a full parking space?
Less than well, that's based on the amount for the total project. So you just have to allocate them amongst the units. The regular rounding rules apply. So if it's 2.5 for the whole thing, I would assume you'd need 3. To my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, council, that my understanding is that you use regular rounding math on all stuff except for the number of affordable units. And in that, like if you do the density calculation, it comes out to be 2.1 units, you get to round that up to 3, but all the other stuff you round based on normal math.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, I'd be amenable to that edit. I have no challenges with that. Anybody have any objections on the commission about that? No. Okay. So staff, do you have that? I believe the numbers were, and correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Hutt, 0.5, 1, and 2 for each of those three respectively.
That's correct.
We do have them, yes.
Great. Are there any other comments? Then I guess I'm looking for a motion to accept.
I
or
will,
to- oops,
I
sorry, go
will
ahead.
move adoption of resolution 2101, recommending approval of the amendments to chapter 1734 with the noted corrections.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? I'm sorry, Commissioner Pevsner, were you a yay or a nay?
Aye. Aye.
Okay. All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And I would echo Commissioner Hutt's sentiments to the staff that they did a great job of getting this put together. Thank you. All right, at this time, we will move on to Planning Commission reports. Any commissioners have anything to report? Then we can move on to Planning and Community Preservation staff reports.
What, Tom?
Yes, Commissioner Pevsner.
I'm going to say something. I haven't been up on the trail very often lately, but I want to say that the work of one of the commissioners is notable, and that the trails are in fantastic shape. So just in time for when the restrictions get lifted, although there's plenty of people up there. And I went up Bailey Canyon, for instance, and I haven't been up Bailey, and I don't know how many years.
Well, I think we lost him.
Lost the connection there.
All right. I guess we'll try to go back to Planning and Community Preservation staff reports.
So I wanted to mention to everybody that on February 23rd, that's our next city council meeting. That is when the city council will hold a public hearing regarding the housing element. They'll look at the alternatives that were originally proposed by the council at their last meeting on that topic, as well as the recommendation from the Planning Commission. So that will be a Zoom meeting on the 23rd of February, next Tuesday. I also wanted to point out that on March 9th, the City Council will also conduct a public hearing regarding the unreinforced masonry building ordinance, and also the affordable amendments to the affordable housing ordinance that we just reviewed this evening. That's our target for both of those items on the March 9th meeting. On our next meeting, which is on March 4th, before the Planning Commission, we do have a couple of projects that are scheduled. One of them was bumped to that meeting, which was the AT&T wireless cell tower. So that will be at our next meeting, as well as a tentative parcel map application. And that concludes my comments.
A tentative parcel map application for where, one might ask?
That is a very large lot off of Orange Grove, 91 East Orange Grove. And that's been for sale for a number of years and vacant for a number of years. Somebody has purchased that, and they're going to be doing a lot split, creating two lots from that single lot.
Didn't we see this lot before in the past, a few years ago?
Probably for a project, and then they submitted another project. That one went away. I had another applicant that never came before the Planning Commission. We were making many, many modifications to that proposed residence, and they decided to sell it. And somebody else has purchased the property and is splitting the lot.
Okay.
I believe both lots are still over 20,000 square feet.
It's a big lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Almost an acre.
Question, Director Gonzalez, can you send us a copy of the staff report for the housing element going to the city council? I looked online and I didn't see it. And it'd be good to take a look at that so we can provide any feedback to the city council.
Yes. So the packet was going to be posted today at 2 o'clock. Maybe it has not been posted, the city council packet, but we will make sure that I can send that to you.
That'd be great. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And were there any updates from the city council meeting where the Mar del Rosa development was discussed that might be relevant to share here?
At this point, there's no news pending.
Chair Dennison, there is a presentation before the planning commission, before the city council. I think Director Gonzalez, you know,
I think that's coming up on probably the March 9th meeting.
that's right, yeah. So for those interested, you may want to attend that meeting. It's an outdoor meeting and I believe the applicant's the presenters, so.
Yes.
Okay. My mistake on the timing of that. And is the March 9th meeting a 4 o'clock meeting or is it reverting to?
That's a 4 o'clock live meeting to be held in the park next to City Hall.
And that will be the presentation that we've heard from the developer. So anybody who wants to learn more about that, that would be a great meeting to be at.
Yes.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Sorry. Anyway, I wanted to compliment Bob on the trails. So I don't know where you guys are at. My power went off in the middle of this whole thing. So I just figured out how to turn it back on. That's what I get for you, my son's Chromebook. Anyway, many thanks to Bob. I think we should nominate him for Citizen of the Year.
No, I'm good. It's a product of the COVID and me being retired with nothing else to do. So it's a safe way to get some exercise.
All right. Well,
I know many among the city appreciate it. Director Gonzalez, are there any other reports?
No other reports.
All right, then at this time, I think we can go ahead and close this meeting until our next regular meeting at March 4th. Thank you all.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, guys.